who are not here today, but specifically I work on the Tree Health Pilot, which is a grant scheme being delivered by the Forestry Commission. And today we've got Matt and Elliot from the Forestry Commission here to talk about the grant in a bit more detail. And we also have John here with us, who is going to talk a little bit about a research project that we ran with the Tree Council starting late last year, and it ran through to early this year, evaluating the grant scheme that we have on offer to try and better understand issues that we're having with uptake and what we can do to design a better grant. So the rough outline today, I'm going to try and keep it to a tight agenda so there's plenty of room for Q&A sessions at the end. But we're going to try and stick to this being specifically about the Tree Health Pilot and the grant offer for ash dieback that we have within the Tree Health Pilot. So if I move along. So I'm going to begin with what is the Tree Health Pilot? So the Tree Health Pilot is a grant scheme that we've had running for about 1.5 years now. It's a 3-year-long grant scheme where we're testing new and novel grants and for tree health related issues that go above and beyond some of the grants that already exist out there, potentially in countryside stewardship and other places in government. A few years ago, we recognised that there was a lot of opportunity for us to be a bit innovative in DEFRA with how, with the kind of support that we're able to deliver and really expand beyond what was already there. So we've got a small scale pilot that's running for 3 years, delivered by the Forestry Commission, testing these new grants to see what works and ahead of launching a full scheme at some point in the future. So what are we testing? We've got a whole series of grants. We've got grants for larch, sweet chestnut, spruce, oak, but the one that we're here to talk about today is dangerous and dying ash that has been affected by ash dieback. So where did this grant come from? So the original ash offer, the idea came from the Ash Dieback Health and Safety Task Force group, which is a group looking at the issues of ash dieback up and down the country, especially in relation to health and safety, so along roads and the issues that come out of that. And one of the key things that that was coming out of the reports at the time was the need that DEFRA was going to have to support in some way the removal of these dangerous and dying ash trees along public roads and public footpaths where they were or where they are serving a potential threat to the public. And specifically, a lot of the feedback at the time we had was that road closures were often expensive and often not coordinated either. So where you've got multiple landowners along a section of road, a road could be closed multiple times over the space of a couple of years to fell ash trees at different points on that road. And also that the environmental protected species surveys that are required when felling ash, those are often prohibitive and stopped or slowed action in terms of removing those dangerous ash trees. So we set about trying to design a grant that was going to support that, bringing together groups so that they could tackle ash together. And this is what we wanted to trial in the pilot, in the Tree Health Pilot. Group grants that pay for, or pay towards, I should say, the closing of that road and the traffic management, and also the same for footpaths, paying for those road closures, those environmental species, protected species surveys, and then also paying for restocking of trees where they've been removed, and some maintenance payments to keep those trees alive over the following years. And then also finally that facilitator's time. So the person who's going to bring that group together and manage that group, we wanted to pay towards it. That's quite an important role, being a facilitator there. So this is something that we set out almost rather blindly with the Tree Health Pilot, not knowing who a facilitator could be, what was involved, what the obstacles would be. There weren't a lot of group grants around at the time that was trying to achieve similar things. So who is the facilitator? This could either be a member of the group or another invested party. And as time's gone on, we've realised, especially through our work with the Tree Council and before that local authorities are often very well placed to do so, as they're often already managing the ash in their area, particularly along roadsides, and already heavily involved in contacting and working with private landowners. The grant is not exclusive for that, but that's certainly become a strong theme for the ash dieback group grant. So where are we now? So we're halfway through the 3-year pilot that we have. We have had so far 160 expressions of interest, but that's across all of our grants, with 46 live applications. And despite having had at least 44 of those expressions as of January being for ash dieback, only 3 have actually managed to turn into applications, which is the point at which we realised that there was clearly something wrong with the offer, I suppose, that we needed to evaluate it and change it so that it would be more appealing. I can see some hands going up, so I will pause. This is my last slide before I will hand over to John. So I'll pause for a couple of questions, but I might defer some of those questions to the end, just because that is where we've got space for the Q&A. We'll see how we go. So yeah, we decided to, with the Tree Council, run a research project along with Forestry research, I should say, involving interviews with local authorities to try and understand why there was no uptake with the tree health pilot, what was wrong with the offer, and what was needed fundamentally to change it. And that's what John will be talking a little bit about today. So I'm jumping ahead ever so slightly in that as of May, some of the updates, we made quite a major update to the pilot based on the findings that we had with the Tree Council, and then that's where we are today, because we're here today to talk to you about what those changes are, but also fundamentally what the offer is, and do a better job of explaining that to you. So I'll pause there to take some questions. I'll try and see the hands, but I can't see them all. Sin, you're on my screen. I see your hands up.
Okay. We have a major issue with ash dieback here where I live. There's land which is still in the hands of the developers. They haven't handed it over yet to the residents. The village say they wanted to help, but they can't because it's not there. That's not parish council land. There's a couple of trees that have got ash dieback. I independently got a tree surgeon out to do a report. A couple of them have ash dieback, and parents are worried about children playing near them. And still nobody is, I've talked to the landowners, I've spoken to everybody, and no one is taking responsibility for this. And still there's danger of these ashes spreading to other ashes. And that is my worst fear, is that the other trees are going to be affected by this. So where do I go from here?
Yeah, I don't mean to just halt you here, but I'm slightly worried that with the sheer number of people we've got on the call, if we do lots of very specific addressing of issues like that right now, we're not going to get through the meat of the conversation. So is it possible that we could defer that to the end? And I don't know if other people's questions are the same. If anybody's got a question that's on what I've just presented, I can see that there's another hand. Stuart, is yours on what I've just talked about just now?
It is, yeah. I just wanted to get some clarity on where you saw with the local authorities. You say the local authorities are well placed to access the grant to allow the people to get the works done. Are we talking the district planning authority, or are we talking the highway authority? It's the highway authorities, I think, you're going to get better traction with around the counties.
So that varies massively, and that's part of the research that we did. It really depends which county you're in. We've spent quite a bit of time talking to local authorities through multiple areas, and who takes responsibility and who manages which sections of road has massively varied from county to county. But yes, we're well aware, and we have worked with the Highways Authority in certain counties as part of this project. But thank you.
But Stuart, probably in your case, it's county.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are we effectively paying ourselves to do our own traffic management using grant funding from central government?
Well, you might think that, and I'm not going to describe it in those terms, but we'll come back to that in a minute, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks, John. John, are you okay if I hand over to you now?
Yeah.
The next section is based on that piece of research that I've been talking about. Thanks, John.
So is that on screen, Joe?
Yeah,
so as Joe said, they'd had a relatively poor uptake from local authorities and others to engaging with this ash dieback offer. So they asked ourselves at Tree Council and Forest Research, and Bianca and Harry and Jackie and Jess and myself set about in a relatively short period of time trying to answer some of the questions about why it wasn't taken up. And the reasons for the low, so the question was, why is local authorities not taking it up? What were the resources that were needed by a local authority to deal with that? What are the changes that would be required to the grant to make it work? And how would we improve the offer on the restocking? And so it was a really rapid bit of work that basically took place from November to February of this last year. Ran through a formal process that DEFRA and Forest Research do to set up research, and involved structured interviews with local authorities and reporting to DEFRA, and a whole range of things that we went through in the process of trying to improve the grant that was. And these tables that I'm about to show you are far too complicated so I'll just draw some. I'm not going to talk about them. They're just basically some examples of the sorts of people that we talked to. So we did talk to county highways people, we talked to district unitary highways people, we talked to arboricultural surveyors, we talked to woodland management officers, we talked to the head of highways. And fundamentally, this thread here, there was very little knowledge that the grant exists. There was very little awareness of what the offer provided. There was very little awareness of how to find out about it, and there were concerns about the amounts of money, the practices, and some of the things that Stuart's already just referred to. So on the back of all that, we drew out some key lessons from what was going on, and one of those first ones that again Stuart's already referred to in his comment is what did it cover and what was it offering? What did road closure in the grant actually mean? Was it not only the legal paperwork for the closure, but the traffic management for the closure? What was the DEFRA offer actually offering? What did facilitation mean, and who could do it? And I know that there are quite a few people, I recognise names and faces. There are a few people on here from parish councils. Well, parish councils theoretically could act as a facilitator. Is that right, Joe? Am I get that right before parish councils potentially being facilitators? Yeah,
they can. Yeah.
So there was an element of what, and if we take local authority to mean at another level, the fourth tier of local government, parish councils, then theoretically a parish could apply as a facilitator, which is one of Sin's sort of original comments. How do you get people to do some stuff? And then there was the element of what was replanting looking like. What are the costs? What are the involvement? So all this research was done, and then the end point was that we made some recommendations to DEFRA on how to improve and clarify the grant, which is what's happened since May, and which you're going to hear about in detail in a second. But the key areas that we understood that needed from all of that discussion and homework with people was that there was a fundamental lack of certainty about and clarity about what the grant was about, and that required much better information, that required much better targeted, clear information about what was going on, what was meant by facilitators, how this could operate in these sort of circumstances where you've got 3 or 4 different landowners. What was a facilitator? What would they do? What could they do? What could they apply for to help get the money? And that has now all been set out in the guidance. And as you're going to hear from our woodland officers in a second, there is now support for people to work their way through that process. There needed to be better comms. There needed to be better information about what this grant was about, what it was trying to achieve. It is still a pilot, so it is learning from its journey about how this may or may not be rolled out nationally. But as a pilot, we need to learn about what goes on, what works, what doesn't. But to do that, you've got to have people apply. You've got to have information that makes people want to apply. So that we're now, so I say we, DEFRA are now setting out to run these sorts of sessions to try and explain what's happening, and you're going to hear in full detail in a minute what it's all about. But there will also be more targeted comms reaching into local authorities and a continual push of all of this through through lots of different channels to make sure that people understand that this money exists, which was half of the battle. Then there was an element that the original grant didn't have enough money in various of the pots. One of those was the facilitation rate, which was considered to be too low at the point of last year. That's been up to £24 this year an hour to help for that facilitation. And the Woodland officers in a minute are going to explain what is meant by the facilitation bit. There has been an upping of the restocking grant. There's been a better advised, information on what is covered by road closure. So all of these fixes have been done by DEFRA as a result of this bit of work. There are, however, things that are still difficult within the grant, within this pilot as it stands. So one of the things that's going to be difficult for a local authority is how the grant is applied for. Many other grant funds currently coming out of DEFRA are Section 31 grants. But because this money is going to the public as well, so in theory, a land agent could apply for this on behalf of three or four of their clients. There has to be slightly different rules about how the money is offered because it's to the public. But DEFRA have spent quite a long time simplifying the application form to try and make it easier for any of you that might contemplate applying to get the money. And there is still the fundamental issue of the fact that there are lack of local authority resources out there. There are still not quite enough officers out there to enable some of this to take place. But as Stuart sort of alluded to a minute ago, if this is in addition to your existing workload and it's additional funding to help with things that you are already doing, it might be something that you should seriously contemplate applying for, because it is public money to help with that activity. And there are some problems around group working and the liabilities of that, and we'll pick up on that later in the conversation. So overall, DEFRA have done a lot with the research that we provided them. They've overhauled the scheme manual. They've included new case studies to help you through the things. They've set up these webinars. There is better comms. They are aspiring to better reach. They have increased the various grant rates, and the application form is now quicker and simpler. So we're hoping that all of that leads to a situation where it is easier for you to apply. But truth be told, we won't know until it happens. We won't know until somebody actually starts applying for the resources. So what we are now going to do is pass back to Joe, who is now going to explain how all of this has then been used and developed with the Woodland officers, Matt, and they're going to tell you about the practicalities of actually applying. But this revision is based upon talking to a lot of the target audience to try and find out if these fixes will help you. So Joe, back to you.
Brilliant, thanks, John. That's an excellent summary. And just to kind of reiterate John's point that this is a pilot scheme. We're trialing things here, so it's inevitable that things are still not dead on target of us getting things right. And this is a fantastic opportunity for anybody who is part of the pilot to be a direct contributing voice to what the grant scheme looks like in the future. So if you are part of this grant scheme, you do have that direct input into what the Ash dieback grant schemes look like, as it's an ever ongoing evaluation process for us. We're still working with Forest Research continually to evaluate this pilot and the success or potential failures that we've got ongoing. So thanks, John. I'm going to now, I'll share my screen again. Unfortunately, the Forestry Commission have had a bit of an issue with tech this morning, so I think I'm the one sharing the slides, but Matt and Elliot will be presenting. So once I go full screen, again, if I could get some thumbs up just to say that they can see it, you guys can see it full screen.
Yes, we can.
Excellent, perfect. So yeah, Elliot, is it handing over to you now? If you could just introduce yourself first as well, that'd be excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone, for joining this morning. Yeah, as Joe says, we've had some FC technical issues, so I'm actually going to turn my camera off as I'm on my phone just to make sure that there's no sort of particular issues. But yeah, so my name is Elliot Carpenter. I started as Tree Health Pilot Woodland Officer just as the pilot launched back in the end of August 2021. So I've been working, engaging with landowners and other land managers on a variety of grants for a range of pests and diseases within the southeastern London, including the ash dieback offer, and have had some involvement with a small amount of ash groups, but some of the initial learning is from those. Very much what John was covering, those particular gaps, and from my initial engagement with particular sort of target facilitator types, those with some good experience already managing ash with ash dieback, these issues around sort of clarity and resource were sort of kept on rearing their head. So the work that has been done through DEFRA FR and Tree Council has been really valuable to review and update the ash offer. So the next slide, please, Joe. So in terms of we identified that local authorities could play a big part in the tree health pilot and managing unsafe and declining ash along roadsides, and our aims, to provide support to them as they're already dealing with this issue, prioritise particular high-risk areas that presented safety risks alongside roadside and public footpaths as well, engaging with a timely and considered response to dealing with the wider issue of ash dieback within tree health, and then focusing in on looking at a collaborative approach between local authorities and other local stakeholders and private landowners to produce that collaborative working, and where appropriate, the restocking of more resilient tree species. So to just confirm the eligible areas within the pilot. So there are two areas where the tree health pilot scheme has been working. So myself, I work across the southeastern London. So if you're able to just put the cursor on southeast, that works, Joe, or not. But I mean, you can see it stretches from East Kent to the edge of Hampshire, going up to Oxfordshire, and then my colleague Matt, who you'll be hearing from shortly, he has been operating in that very large area of the Northwest and the West Midlands. Unfortunately, it's not available outside of these two areas, partly for resource and just ensuring that we have particular areas where we can focus and ensure we get some good cases. So what we thanks, Joe. What we offer is so as Joe and John mentioned, the road closure grant and road closure and traffic management grants, site surveys, so that's European protected species surveys, and then restocking, capital items and maintenance for both woodland and trees outside of woodlands. But yes, these do have to be group applications. Individual applications, unfortunately, we're looking for that collaborative approach. So and there is existing support for individual woodland owners through schemes like countryside stewardship. There is no grant for felling, so that's something that is put to us quite often. We are focusing on this roadside safety issue and the reduction in time and cost through collaborative working along the roadside. So in a bit more detail, so 60% of the actual cost of the road closure and traffic management. So for that, you would need to provide 2 quotes for cost effectiveness, and we take the lower of the quotes. Similarly, with the European protected species surveys, another 2 quotes. It's an actual cost item, and yes, we take the lower one. And then for the facilitator, so as John touched upon, so the facilitator is responsible for the coordination of all the group work and the application. So that can include time to put the application together, to to coordinate with landowners, to coordinate with local woodland officers for things such as felling licenses, for the surveys, for the coordination with the contractors for traffic management, and then yes, I mean anything that is involved with actually coordinating the group's agreement and funded activities. As mentioned, there is a restocking grant, so this is for both within woodlands and for trees outside of woodlands. So where appropriate, to restock, the restocking rate for within woodland, it goes up to £6,000 per hectare within ancient semi-natural woodlands, and then for non-ancient woodlands planted with native tree species, it's £4,720 per hectare, and then a maintenance rate for woodland of £350 per hectare for 5 years, I believe. And then restocking trees outside of woodland, the restocking rate is £270.44 for a standard tree, £3.79 for feathers, and £2.29 for whips, with related maintenance rates of £189 per large tree and 14p per feather or whip. Yes, as John shown in his slides, there's been work done to give clarity as to what a group looks like. I mean, all sites are different, and all groups are going to be slightly different. But this is a good illustration of how it might how one might look. So along the roadside edge, you'd have it. Yes, the local authority owning parcels of land on either side of the roadside, and then landowners owning connecting parcels along that road that can form a group. And obviously it would make sense to have a single road closure or single traffic management operation in order to get all that work done in one go. It doesn't have to be contiguous. This is obviously a good example, and contiguous neighbours makes a lot of sense if they're all affected by ash, but it would need to be.
Sorry, someone's phone's ringing.
Kerry speaking. Good morning.
And yeah, so it doesn't necessarily need to be contiguous, but the landowners as part of the group would all need to be benefiting from the same road closure and traffic management. So there could be blocks in between, but as long as the time and the
Elliot, you've gone on mute.
Apologies. Where have I got to there?
I think you're just describing this potential group.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so the so just say it doesn't need to be contiguous. There can be sort of area gaps within between landowners, but essentially every site is going to be different. But what we want is that the whole group is benefiting from the reduction in time and cost from these road closures and traffic management. And essentially, the best way to work out exactly how the group looks is to submit an expression of interest form to the pilot, having established a group of 2 or more different landowners, and then this will mean we can set up a site visit by myself or Matt, depending on the area, and then we can go through the plan operations, the grants themselves, and really get into the detail. And then from then on, our team will get an application pack sent out to the lead facilitator. So for the application, there are some things that it's good to know up front that these are what are needed. So each group would need to have a single business identifier registered with the RPA. So that can be done. It can just be done for this particular project. It doesn't need to be a specific land parcel. And then an approved felling license where applicable. So really, that's that. You would need to engage with your local woodland officer, who will then be able to advise on that. And then, the information on numbers of trees outside of woodlands, the approximate areas of the holding, and the approximate areas for restocking, as well as restocking capital items and ensuring that the restocking is UKFS compliant. Just a quick idea of the application process. There's a bit of text in there. We can share these slides afterwards, so you can have a bit more of a look. But essentially, time it can take time to submit the application in terms of the group formation. So just be aware of that. That can be the uncertain, but may potentially longer depending on the group dynamic. But once the application is submitted, we will notify the lead facilitator within 4 weeks of the receipt of the application, and then the acceptance of the grant offer must be received by within 2 weeks of the offer being made, and then the grant agreement will be live, and any grant funded activities can start. And then as a group, you would either, the lead facilitator would complete a biosecurity management plan or complete a biosecurity pro forma as part of the agreement. And then once the works have been completed, you'll be able to claim, and we will look to process that within 28 days of receipt. Next slide, please, Joe. So timescales can vary. They are dependent on the site-specific constraints. It is good to manage expectations. Be aware that sort of group formation can take a bit of time because it is engagement with a number of different people. But with that in mind, I would say to look at potential projects that are achievable. So the grant duration is 12 months. So you would need to have the grant funded activities completed within that time. So we want to make sure that it is dealing with the issue, but at the same time, it is something that's achievable within this within that duration. Again, this is a pilot, so we are really looking for good cases that could then be sort of transferable in the future, that provide a large amount of learning. So yeah, within that, the group composition can, as I say, can affect those timescales. The requirement of felling licenses, there is an inherent time period for processing and public consultation. Getting quotes from contractors can take some time, and also arranging the surveys. But once the application's in, the agreements can go live within 6 weeks of the full it being submitted. So now I'll pass over on to my colleague Matt, who'll take through some of the more sort of grants and the regulation side of things.
Thank you, Elliot. So as Elliot mentioned before, I'm the Tree Health Pilot Woodland Officer for the North West and West Midlands. So I run from Cumbria right the way down to Herefordshire. So if you do fall in any of those areas, then I would be your main point of contact. So I think what we're going to do at the moment is just run through a few things, looking at regulation sides of things. So as Elliot mentioned before, you may need a felling license, but then that's not always the case. So it's just a quick heads up and some information with you to hopefully understand whether you need a felling license or not. So on this slide, we've really got some information there. If you're not familiar with any of the felling license getting permission, I strongly urge people to either visit their local woodland officer or get in contact with them, or at least have a look at the online resources we have. We do have a link for that at the end of this slideshow, so hopefully you'll be able to click on that. There are some other things along the lines for exemptions. So I don't know how many people on here are aware of the Highways Act section 154, which is a act basically allowing people to come and fell their dangerous trees that are overhanging the road and stuff. Again, other things along with that, it is definitely worthwhile contacting your local woodland officer for other information onto that. You will also need UKFS compliancy as well, but again, this is down to regulations, so I strongly urge you get in contact with either myself or your local woodland officer to have some discussions around those. If we could have the next slide, please. So other regulations we've got, again, as Elliot pointed out, it is one case does not fit all. There are numerous constraints, numerous complexities, and it is important to have an aware of these when you'll start writing the application. So if you do have specific constraints such as SSSIs, historic environments, special areas of conservations, TPOs, then those are all added to the overall time frame of the application. So if it was me, I'd strongly recommend that you get a felling license or anything of that nature in first, because as we know, felling licenses usually take roughly around 28 days worth of consultation period. That again, that may be extended due to the specific constraints. So again, it is definitely worthwhile just making sure you get things in place before applications move forward. Again, what we got consultation periods, yeah, it's just a thing you need to understand. And again, Wildlife and Countryside Acts, most of you should be aware of that. So felling of trees cannot take place during the months between March and August. And again, these are just the overarching theme of this really is, if in doubt, please do contact your local woodland officer or myself or Elliot, depending on which area you're in. And that way we can hopefully better advise you and help you get this application in. Next slide, please, Joe. Yeah, and I think other than that, as I mentioned before, these are the resources and the links that we can pass around. There are lots of handy things on there, but related to ash dieback, not only just related to ash dieback, there's also other guidance on there for overall general tree health, things of that nature. And if I do have a bit of time left, I think I've got 2 minutes before we open up for questions. I want to just make people aware of the tree alert app system that we do have running at the moment. And it's definitely worthwhile familiarising yourself with that. It allows us as the tree health officers for the Forestry Commission to go out and survey things and get an overall picture and the quality of diseases and pests and diseases that are out there. So I do advise people to check Tree Alert out. Yeah, I think that's it. Is it, Joe? Next slide.
I think that's it. Yeah, just on to questions now. Thanks, Matt. That was really useful. Yeah, that was great. So just before we get on to questions, I'm just going to sort of run through what we expect these groups to look like, because I think although we've got that example there, you know, all of your circumstances are different. But I think the general idea behind the grant, behind getting these groups together, is if you're aware of an area where there are a lot of ash trees that are suffering from ash dieback along roads, along public footpaths, and there's some complexities involved because it's multiple landowners, and you think that it could really benefit if the costs were paid, you know, bring that group together and the costs were paid for the road closures. There was money available to replant the trees that are there, and whoever's going to organise that and take that lead role can get some facilitation money to subsidise their time for doing so. Then that's really what this grant is available for. And we really encourage anybody who is in an eligible area, even if you're unsure about the potential of your group application, to, you know, get in touch with us via our email. I'm going to share a link in the chat to both a bit more information on the guidance. That's where our expressions of interest form sits, as well as I'm including the Tree Health Pilot Inquiries email, which, if you want to get directly in contact with Matt or Elliot, who would be in your eligible area, then you can send an email straight to them. Great. So we have about 20 minutes left now for questions, which is kind of ideal. I'm going to say, if we can try to keep the questions specific to the pilot and applying to the pilot, and any information that you need further from this, that would be excellent. So I'm going to look. Team seems to have this magic thing now where it kind of tells you the order in which people have raised hands now as well. So Michael, it looks like your hand went up first.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just a couple of questions, I guess. One is, your list of constraints doesn't include conservation areas, which of course protect the trees. So if they are protected, you would need to be giving notice, and that's 6 weeks notice. And I guess for tree preservation orders, that's a minimum of 8 weeks potentially as a consultation period. So that will exceed your period for a felling license. You mentioned 154 of the Highways Act. That obviously requires a notice to be submitted for that to be used. I think that's 2 weeks notice, but I think they're all timeframes and constraints that are worth adding to your presentation. I mean, the other thing is, I know, and it's a long-standing subject, and John and I, we've had a few chats about this before, the distinction between trees growing in a sort of in isolation, I guess, or in small numbers, and ash trees which are growing on a roadside verge where there's lots of them, and you can still see a very distinct difference between the impact of ash dieback. So we should just exercise some caution in terms of how we manage this, and don't literally throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of felling every ash tree, because it's expedient and cheaper to do that through one highways traffic control notice. And I think that's important. I mean, I think equally, on the other hand, you don't want to be there every week taking out another one. But there's just, I think we've just got to be careful that we don't end up losing all of our ash trees, when lots of them, and I've got 2 outside my house which seem almost perfectly fine, and there are plenty which are fine. But there's a massive distinction between, as you say, woodland, and particularly the younger stuff that's growing on roadside verges. And I just think adding that to your notes in future presentations would be handy. Particularly depending on the sort of breadth of the audience that you're passing these to, because there'll be people that's just think, well, they're all ash trees, and so we should fell them all. And I think it's just getting that right balance. That's all I was going to say. Really wasn't a question, more of a series of little additions.
No, that's really
and Joe,
useful.
if I may just come on in that, since Mike referred to me, Mike, I agree that there is that danger of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And in Devon now, for example, they are generally just pollarding stuff if they have to do work rather than felling. So there is a whole range of management treatments that need to be explored as part of this. It isn't just wholesale felling.
And it's, it's worth adding as well, that's kind of built into the design of the grant, and it's one of the reasons that we're not necessarily directly paying for felling. We're not trying to encourage it. It's the Forestry Commission's line that we're not trying to indiscriminately fell all ash. We are looking for genetic resilience and resistance to ash dieback. So we are trying to encourage people to keep it in the landscape where they think it's not posing a risk to the public. That's certainly, core to what we're trying to do.
Just jump in there, Joe, as well. I mean, from the Woodland Office's point of perspective, you're 100% correct in the fact that we don't want to essentially greenlight the felling of all ash in the UK, because again, we are looking for that genetic diversity and the longevity of the ash trees within our counties and land. So my advice then would be to always try and seek out some sort of professional arboricultural report, and that way we as a commission and the group members will have a better idea of the overall health of the tree, because you may end up having a report that says we don't need to fell that tree because it's still looking like it's going to survive. It's the other ones that we look at the report that have got the red dot to it or the expectation date to it, and that's the ones we are looking to target, the ones that are most likely to fall and cause injury and damage.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so coming on, Alan Marsh, you're next. Do we still have Alan? You might be frozen on my. Oh.
Right, I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, I've got 2 questions. I don't think my borough is within the pilot area. I think we unfortunately border London. Parts of our borough are within the M25 and parts are outside. But my question really was 2 things. You've got an SBI is required for the group. Is that for the group or any one member of the group?
Yeah, we need an SBI just for the group. So for the SBI,
so the group would have to set up as a single business within DEFRA.
Doesn't necessarily have to be. If there is a group member who is happy to,
to
provide
so
their
a
SBI,
group member with an SBI can use that number.
yes, but
Okay,
at the same
and
time, sorry.
The second question is, can a group involve 2 local authorities? So can a group be 2 local authorities, the highways and the borough?
So we're still trying to make it so that groups do involve the general public and private landowners and land managers. So we are, at the moment, are looking to prioritise applications and agreements that do involve that collaborative effort, not just from highways authorities and local authorities, land only.
Right.
I think our current thing is that there has to be at least one private landowner involved for it to be an eligible group.
Okay. And in light of what was said beforehand by John and Mr. Sankus, we've been dealing with ash in this borough for about 4 years now. We're a very small borough, very limited funds, and I went through Dutch elm disease or elm disease back in the 60s and 70s. We cannot afford to go back to sites time after time after time. We have a huge amount of ash in this borough, and I really would like to see some sensible direction in terms of economic methods of dealing with it. I'm fully aware of the non-motor manual aspect of working on ash. We use a MUP and we're using harvesters, but it's costing us an absolute fortune. My tree budget for the last 4 years has been decimated. I can't do any other form of arboriculture basically within the borough. So if that could be looked at, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Will you wait till the Monday when you get back?
Thank you. Okay. So we will move on next. We've got Jordan Walker.
Oh yeah, I've got 4 questions if that's all right. Hopefully they'll be quick and easy to get on. But the application requires 2 quotes that you mentioned. For, I think, was it tree planting or was that road closures as well? If we're a highway and we're on a schedule of rates, it's particularly hard to get 2 quotes, and it's particularly time consuming to do that. Would a schedule of rate item quote be applicable? Could we only do 1, or does it have to be 2 quotes?
We would ideally like 2, but I mean we can look at 1. I mean if it's impossible, then yes, I mean it's something we can look at, but ideally we would like 2 for that cost effectiveness. But just say on planting, on restocking, those are standard cost items, so they don't require quotes.
Okay, perfect. That's useful. So still apply effectively, or still approach you.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a landowner is interested and then pulls out at some stage, can the other participants still continue with the application?
Yes. I mean, we do have mechanisms for that. I'd have to double check exactly what they are with our incentives development team. But yeah, that it can still proceed. That's no problem, provided it is still a group.
Yeah, perfect. For other grants, I've noticed the maintenance is quite excessive, the maintenance period. What's the maintenance requirements for say, whips going back in adjacent the side of the highway? Because often or not, it's particularly hard for us to maintain those whips in terms of, watering, and some of the other grants require quite excessive amounts of watering, particularly hard for a highway bowser on a, national speed limit road.
Sure. So it is a little bit, it's less for trees outside of woodlands. I believe the obligation period for woodlands is 8 years so that they establish. I believe it's 5 years, but I will double check on that for you, Jordan, and can send it over.
Yeah, that would be ideal. I mean, if it's in there, I haven't actually looked, admittedly, so I probably should look. But
it's in the terms and conditions, but they're being updated as it is pilot. So I'll double check on those and circulate them to everyone.
Perfect. And is there any example letters and advertisement that can go out from facilitators? So if we're the highway or the county, is there a standard sort of advertisement that can go out to private landowners, or do we have to make, or can we make one ourselves, or what's the best approach?
I think the best approach would be, I mean, if you have something that you already use, then that's great. But we can also supply some info to support that with the Tree Health Pilot Scheme. So yeah, that sort of collaboration we're definitely keen to work with and ensure that the best message is getting out there with all the necessary information.
Perfect. And my last one, I promise. If we've already felled trees with ash dieback, can we apply for the planting cost of replacement planting?
Yes, we would need evidence that the trees were there. So a felling license, a prior felling license, something evidencing that there was ash with ash dieback. Yes,
So any sort of if we've just got the tree report and the actual in receipt of the felling works.
Yes, I mean also additionally any photos would also be really helpful, but it's something that myself and Matt would be happy to sort of talk through and just make sure that everything's there.
Excellent. Thanks, Elliot, and thanks others. Cheers.
Thank you for that, Jordan. And just to reiterate what I've said in the chat, I can see there's quite a lot of questions in the chat. I'm probably not going to be able to do the simultaneous thing of answering questions with people with their hands up as well as what's in the chat. But any questions that are outstanding in the chat, I will be responding to, and I'll send a follow-up email with the individual response to each of those questions to everybody on this call. But if you do want an answer today, I recommend sticking your hand up. Thanks. Okay, so Alan, your hand's still up. I think we've been to you already. Paul Smith.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Paul Smith from the Arboricultural Association, and forgive me, it'll only take a minute. It's just a point of clarification, which I'm sure is not needed for many delegates, but with the Highways Act Section 154, unlike the Section 211 notice conservation areas, just to clarify that is an opportunity for the Highway Authority to serve notice on a landowner where there are dangerous or obstructing trees, etc. It's not a case that the landowner has to serve a notice on the Highway Authority if they wish to deal with said trees in the way they would under a Section 211 conservation area notification. So I just don't think, for those people who aren't familiar, that was made particularly clear. That's it. Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you. Okay, Steve. Steve Harding, that is.
Hi, apologies. I was struggling to try and find my cursor and find the mute button. Just a couple of things. One was regarding Jordan's question about essentially backdating claims, which sounds very interesting. I would wonder how far we could go with that. And then kind of linked to that is obviously for those of you that don't know, I work for Cornwall Council. That the offer isn't applicable there at present. So yeah, timescales. I know we spoke yesterday, but it'd be useful to share with the group kind of an idea of when this offer might be available to other areas in the country, and if that is going to be a while, is there anything that DEFRA can do to use that backdating offer to help landowners kind of have a light at the end of the tunnel and encourage them to work properly, so that if they apply for a felling license and they act in the way that they should or they would with the grant funding, that they can claim that money back. I know that doesn't get around the facilitator point, but yeah, that was it. Those two questions.
Thanks, Steve. Just very quickly on that. When we talk about backdating, there is no possibility to claim for work that's already taken place. I think what we were talking about is the idea of applying correct me if I'm wrong, but we're applying for restocking for where trees have been removed. So if you want to put trees in where trees were removed in the past due to ash dieback, probably within the last couple of years, then you might be eligible for that, but not payments for work that has already taken place, which is not something that government is able to do for any grant, actually.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I thought that was the case.
Yeah,
but just that point confused me a little. Thank you.
Did I hear you jumping in on something?
No, it was very much the same point. Yes, just say to clarify, if you have already felled but are yet to replant and you wish to replant, then yes, you'd be able to apply for that. But yeah, as Joe said, it's not possible to fund any actions that have already been undertaken.
Yeah, thanks. Who have we got? Is it Donovan?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, it was just sort of going on from the restocking, to be honest with you. Obviously, we have a lot of ash trees on roadsides, but a lot of them, if they were to be removed, we haven't got the facilitations in that area to be able to replant. So is there any restrictions on where the restocking takes place if they were to be removed from the streets? So could we replant in a different location, or do they have to go back where they came from?
I mean,
yeah,
Sorry, Joe. From our perspective, we were always open to being able to restock in alternative areas, but you would still need to get in contact with us, and then we can go through it together on a one-to-one basis and have a look of where you think you want to replace them, because essentially what we don't want to happen is to plant trees in the same place and then in the next 20 to 30 years or 50 years they're going to cause the same problem again. So it's about having that discussion with the treehouse pilot woodland officer or woodland officer, depending on who you get in contact with. But yeah, to answer your question, there isn't really.
No, that's brilliant. That's absolutely great. Yeah.
Just that with a caveat, of course, it can't. I don't think it can be exclusively anywhere planting these new trees, because ultimately these trees are meant to, along with the requirements of any felling license you've got, these are meant to be replacement trees for trees that have been lost. And I think if they start getting planted elsewhere, it changes the scope of what it's no longer restocking. You're potentially going through land use change, and it's now planting of new woodland or new tree areas. So I think when we talk about new areas, it might be, still within quite a small radius of where the original trees were. But if it was unreasonably close to the road, for example, there's no reason why they couldn't be set further back when you plant the new trees. But we're not talking about woodland creation, for example, in a different area, because there are woodland creation grants that exist already, and where we have restocking, and then there are woodland creation grants, though we're meant to not step on each other's toes in terms of where the grants can put trees in the ground.
No, that's totally understandable. We've currently got a woodlands creation grant going through at the moment, but it's more for the factors. Once these trees are removed, they're pretty much, it's going to be hard tarmac. There's going to be nowhere, unless we start doing some major excavations to put tree pits back in, we wouldn't be able to put trees back into the same location. So what we would like to do is maybe put them in some green space that's nearby, or open space, or near to parks, things like that. So they would still be standard trees. We wouldn't be looking at replanting woodlands. It'd be just the standard trees for the numbers that we've removed. But I just didn't want it to be, we have to put it back there, because obviously the restocking funding that you're being given wouldn't surplus any replacements in those locations.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for the context. And like with all of these, if you've got questions like that, I think those are perfect to be sent through to Matt and Elliot, who can answer them specifically. Yeah. I'm aware we're at time, so if anybody that has to go, I'll just say thank you very much for your time today and putting this hour aside to come and listen to us. And like I've said multiple times already, I really do encourage you to take a look at our guidance. If you think you're eligible, either get in contact with us through the email I've put in the chat, or you'll be able to see on the guidance that there is the ability to submit an expression of interest form. I can see we've got two more hands. I'm going to take those as the final two questions. But yes, of course, if anybody needs to leave now, please feel free to do so. So Matthew Willits.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you, thanks.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to chip in because I know there was mention about funding outside of the pilot areas. So just wanted to make people aware on the call that there is the Countryside Stewardship Woodland Tree Health grant available for areas that are not in this pilot. I mean, it's only applicable for woodlands, of course, but there is ash woodland up against roads that if they've got ash dieback need felling. So yes, just want to sort of bear in mind there is that other funding initiative out there that landowners can tap into. Thank you.
That's really useful. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, we should have mentioned that previously. Yeah. And then last question, Jennifer Shales.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. So as a member of the local highway authority down in the southwest, this sounds great, and I can appreciate obviously there needing to be a pilot phase in order to sort of work the ground up and build on top of that. I totally get that, which is great. When realistically are we sort of looking to see this sort of level of support filter down to these other counties? Because obviously, as I know, Joe, we spoke probably 6 to 9 months ago, and we already are doing cyclical inspections in the summer. We're already eyebrows deep in conversations with local landowners, and we are receiving that continuous feedback that it's people, essentially people's roadside street trees are disappearing quicker than they are going to be restocked or potentially even have access to sort of restocking. So I guess there's a few things. Firstly, when really are the other counties going to start to see some sort of support, first and foremost, but then also how are the sort of implications of like tree stock as well? Have there been sort of onward considerations that if you're throwing loads of money at investment and what have you across the different counties, does it then mean that in 3 to 5 years the southwest and the other counties aren't going to have that facility to really take advantage of any stock that might be being worked on in various bits and pieces at the moment? Does you sort of follow where I'm going with that?
Yeah, totally. Those are really pertinent questions. Thanks. Just quickly on that, on the second one, whilst I've got it in my head, there are quite a few grants and schemes that government is working on, and I have colleagues that are working on currently that are available to the sector, where we're trying to scale up sector capacity for tree planting, because there's obviously in the last 5 years alone and looking forward, there is an awful lot going on in the tree planting space. Woodland creation grants, there are recovery grants, for example, through the Local Authority Treescapes Fund. There's a lot of money going out around for putting trees in the ground, and DEFRA is very aware of this. Forestry Commission is very aware of this. So there are grants that are trying to boost sector capacity now and help nurseries with making sure that tree stock follows the same trend as the amount of tree planting going on. So that is definitely being looked at and should be in hand. As for your other point, when, I think it's probably one of the most important questions that's going to get asked today, when is this going to be rolled out nationally? It's a really tricky question for us to answer working on the tree health pilot, because obviously we're in this pilot phase currently, and that is due to run until around September next year, after which we're hoping there's going to be either no window or a very short window between the end of the pilot phase and when we're able to, for example, update countryside stewardship to have an inclusion for ash dieback in the way that the pilot is offering a grant now, and that would be available to everybody throughout England, including Cornwall and the southwest. We can't make any promises on that because at the moment we're only working on this pilot phase, and it's going to be very dependent on whatever the priorities are at the time when the pilot comes to the end. But we are hoping that it's going to be late 24 or sometime in 2025 before we get to roll that out nationally. And I can imagine that might be maybe a bit disappointing to some, because that's a little while away. But that is unfortunately the time constraints that we're playing with, and it's really important that we do get valuable feedback through this pilot to understand that when we launch a full grant nationally, that we're not launching something that's rubbish ultimately and doesn't serve you all. So we are trying to get that right first.
Cool, thanks.
Brilliant. Well, no more questions, so I will just say thank you very much, John, from the Tree Council, for attending today and updating everybody on the research we did, and thanks very much to our presenters Matt and Elliot for talking about the pilot. And with that, I'll let everybody get back to their Friday mornings. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Like I said, I will be circulating responses to the questions that have been posted in the chat in an email to everybody that was on this call. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.